Welcome to Rise Up Voices from the Front Lines, your window into relationships, identity, safety, emotional awareness, regulation and intelligence, unleashed potential, passion and purpose.
I want to start this conversation somewhere real, not in theory, not in study, but in a moment that plays out in a lot of homes that don't talk about it. One of my amazing clients in law enforcement, with over a decade on the job, walked into session and said something that really struck me. He said, "I don't have a problem at work. I am good at my job. I know what I'm doing out there. It's my house I don't understand." When I asked him to tell me more about that, what he described was this. He'd come home after shift, sit on the couch, and his daughter, just 6 years old, would run up to him, excited to see him. And instead of feeling that warmth, that connection, he felt irritated. Not because she'd done anything wrong, but because his body still braced. It was still scanning, still holding tension, still in a state that made closeness feel like one more demand instead of something that he could receive. And he said, "I hate this. I hate myself. I hate that I feel this way." And that moment right there, that's where this conversation lives. Because it's not a character issue. It's a nervous system that never got the signal that the threat is over. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rise Up Voices from the Front Lines. This is a Responders Edition. I'm Krista Fee, and I'm a trauma-informed practitioner, educator, and founder of the Rise Up Phoenix Trauma and Crisis Institute. My work sits at the intersection of neuroscience, trauma, human behavior, and real-world high-stress environments. This series is for first responders, military and medical professionals, dispatchers, and the families who are building a life alongside that reality. Because what we're talking about here isn't just what happens on the job. It's what happens after and how that carries into the spaces that matter to us most. So today we're talking about the cost of constant readiness. And I want to ground this conversation the right way. Hypervigilance isn't a problem. Intensity isn't the problem. Your awareness, your responsiveness, your edge, that's not the issue. These are the adaptations, and they were all built for a reason. You need them. The problem is when the system that was designed to activate in these moments of threat never fully stands down. From a neuroscience standpoint, your brain has learned through repetition and consequences that it is safer to stay ready than to risk missing anything. Your amygdala becomes highly efficient. Your sensory systems are sharpened. Your predictive brain starts running ahead of time. And again, in your world, that's not dysfunctional. It's a skill set. And that's why you're trusted in critical moments. And there's nothing broken about a system that adapted to survive repeated exposure to high stakes environments. But where this starts to cost you is in the absence of threat. Because activation is only half of the stress cycle. The other half is completion, discharge, regulation, returning to baseline. And most responders are never trained in that part. So the system stays activated, and over time, that's going to show up as difficulty sleeping, emotional numbing, irritability, low frustration tolerance, and disconnection from people that you care about. And here's the important piece. It doesn't feel like something's wrong. It just feels normal. So let's go back to that responder for a moment. Because once he understood what was happening inside his body, something shifted. Not overnight, and of course not magically, but he stopped labeling himself as the problem. and we started working with the system instead of against it. He began noticing what state he was in when he walked through the door. And one of the first things that I introduced to him wasn't complicated. It was a pause before entry, sitting in his car for a minute, not on his phone, not distracting, just noticing, even with his hands still gripping the steering wheel, often tighter than necessary, his shoulders slightly elevated, and his breath shallow and high in his chest. And instead of trying to force himself to relax, he did something simple. He exhaled slowly, longer than his inhale, not once, a few times. And then he dropped his shoulders on purpose, just enough to signal to his body that something was changing. That was it. No big ritual, no performance, just a small, intentional shift in state. And then he went inside. And a few days later, his daughter ran up to him again, that same moment with that same energy. But this time, there was enough space inside his system to receive that. And he told me she hugged me, and I actually felt it. I didn't have to fake it this time. And here's what's powerful about that moment. It wasn't just about him regulating himself. It changed what his daughter experienced, because kids don't respond to what we say. They respond to what our nervous system communicates to theirs. And that small shift created a different interaction. And that's called co-regulation. And we don't always need to call it that, but it's co-regulation in real life, in real time. When this goes unaddressed, families adapt around it. Partners stop reaching out. Kids stop initiating. Not because they don't love you, but because they read the room. And children especially will internalize what they don't understand. They don't think my parent is dysregulated. They think I'm too much or I'm not enough. And that's how these patterns quietly move forward. And this is where we need to be honest about culture, because responder culture builds readiness exceptionally well. It does not build recovery with the same level of intention. We reward pushing through. We reward endurance. We normalize exhaustion. And we overlook the biological reality that without recovery, performance declines, relationships strain, and systems eventually break down. So instead of jumping to solutions, I want to offer you something really simple to start with. I invite you to begin noticing transitions. When you leave work, when you enter your home, when someone's trying to connect with you, what state is your body actually in? Not what do you think it should be, but what's real. Because awareness of state is the first doorway to changing it. You've trained your body to stay ready, and you do an amazing job. And if that same system is now interfering with connection, rest, or presence, then the work is not to shut it down. The work is to expand your capacity to come back, because you deserve to be effective in all of your roles and present in your life. So if this resonates with you, I invite you to stay with this series. We're going to walk through identity, relationships, emotional regulation, parenting, and recovery from a place that is grounded in both science and lived experience. If you're ready for deeper work, you can connect with me one-on-one or step into the Rise Up Responder community. I'll put some links in the show notes for you to explore. Please follow, like, or share wherever you get your favorite podcasts. It really does make a difference. Rise Up Phoenix Trauma and Crisis Institute is your one-stop hub for mental wellness, safety, preparedness, leadership and life mastery. Stay ready when it matters and come back when it's over. That's how we protect both the mission and the life that you are building.